morning, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday the 27th of February and what a panel today. Author Jeffrey Archer, historian Tessa Dunlop, welcome both. Here's what's on the show. First up, should the Conservative Party take Lee Anderson back? Anderson has insisted he's not going to apologise for his remarks about Sadiq Khan. Now, some members of the party are demanding the suspension is lifted. Are they right? We'd love to hear from you. Reform UK party leader Richard Tice will be joining us too, because there's some talk now that Lee Anderson may move to reform before the election. Then is it right to ban abusive patients from hospital? If patients or visitors get violent and aggressive in some hospitals, they could face a 12-month ban. Reports of abuse in hospitals are up. That's as the NHS wait times soar, and some are waiting 12 hours to be seen in A&E, 12 hours on a trolley. Is it fair to ban people? We'll hear from Dr. Emeka Okorocha about the abuse he suffered on the job. And then his so-called Generation Sick note damaging the economy. The number of 18 to 24-year-olds on long-term sick, particularly with mental illness, has more than doubled. They're off sick for poor mental health. Are they hurting our country's economy by being jobless? Then a look at some of the stories in the papers and online, including Labour's plans to tackle misogyny in schools. At 11:15, it's Dawn Neeson in for Storm, here with Narinder Kaur and Mike Parry debating whether Trump should lay off Prince Harry. 12:45, Alexis Conran and friends. We'll be talking about mortgages and how you can save money on yours. So loads to get through. We want to hear from you. Let me show you how to get in touch. Here we are with the help of these hot air balloons. Somewhere, someone has our number, I think. Where is it? Here we are, 0207 862 2222. If you want to call us and get in touch, we would absolutely love that. And if you are ringing from a landline, it'll be about 16p a minute. But the key thing to add, balloon number 3 is mobiles may be dearer. So then we have our social media. If you're online, just type Jeremy Vine on 5 and you will find us on TikTok. You'll find us on Insta. We're also on that one's Twitter, now X, Facebook, and the other one no one's on, Threads as well. Plus, we have a YouTube channel as well. So, Jeffrey, we welcome you back because you've been away writing, as you always do this time of year.
I got back this week.
Oh, brilliant.
And you very kindly invited me on in January, but so here I am.
We couldn't tempt you away from, is it Marbella or Mallorca? Or...
Sorry. It's Mallorca. I go away for about 6 weeks, about 50 days, 8 hours a day, 6 to 8, 10 to 12, 2 to 4, 6 to 8, bed by 9:30, up at 5:30.
And just you in the house, no one else?
Well, Mary comes over for the first period, but while she was chairman of the Science Museum, of course, she had to get back to be chairman. So I was on my own for quite a time. She's now come to the end of her term of office.
Right.
So she stayed longer.
OK. Do you know how many books this man has sold?
Well, all I do know is that as a teenager, I was reading Cain and Abel, First Among Equals, and I was very proud of this. I felt this was a badge of honour that I was able, because they've always been monster books, your books. I consider them, I mean, at least now there's Kindle, so when I do indulge in my Jeffrey addiction, it doesn't weigh me.
Quite thick paper, but 320 million is the answer. 320. Now, the current series is about a police officer called William Warwick, and Jeffrey's idea was you take him from police constable all the way to Commissioner of the Met, and there's 9 ranks in between. And the deal we had, I think you might remember this, is if you were to sadly and tragically pass away before completing the series, I was going to complete it for you. You remember this? I think you agreed to that.
I've got lucky because at the age of 77, when I started the William Warwicks, I needed to live to 84, 85 to get to the end of the William Warwicks. And you're quite rightly, you say, coming from a constable on the beat through to Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. He's now a chief superintendent. And in the next book, he'll be a commander. And in the final book, he'll be fighting to be commissioner.
So you'll be writing about commander in Mallorca. The book that's out at the moment is, just to show I'm on it with this, with Jeffrey's book, is Traitor's Gate. And that's where... So you came and you spoke about it, and the brilliant thing, I've always said this is the best book PR thing I've ever seen, is Jeffrey had a crown made. And you can see the picture that we took, because I wore the crown you brought in, and it really was quite heavy. And the reason he had the crown made was because the crown jewels are part of the story.
Yes, what's important when you look at that crown, is that you believe it's the one Charles wore at the coronation. I've now decided, and it was made by a brilliant man from Hatton Garden called Alan Gard. It took him 500 hours to make it.
Wow.
I've given it to Cambridge University Trust Hospital, and they are going to auction it at Bonham. So all the money will go to Cambridge University Trust Hospital.
Tessa.
I mean, that takes book promotion
Children's
up
Hospital.
to a whole new level,
I think
darling.
it's the best thing I've ever seen.
But what I want to know is, how much research do you do into today's police force? I mean, do you have Mark Rowley on speed dial, I suppose is what I'm
No. I have 2 police officers, one Chief Superintendent Johnny Sutherland, who was head of the murder squad, and one Detective Sergeant Michelle Roycroft, who worked in the Arts and Antique Squad. They're both retired. They've been with me right from the beginning. I'm very proud of them both because Johnny Sutherland's written his own book, which has been a triumph, on why he collapsed mentally when he was in charge of the murder squad, in what he calls one murder too many. And Michelle, who I employed 7 years ago to advise me on what the art and antique shop unit did at Scotland Yard, has been appointed as the officer in charge of investigating the British Museum. So I've got the answer to your question, 2 remarkable people who read the book at every level and say, a policeman can't do that, but you can do that.
Friends in
All
high
right.
places.
Let's move on to the latest on Lee Anderson, if we may. Red Wall Tories are calling for Lee Anderson's suspension to be lifted and for him to be let back into the Tory party. That's after he was accused of Islamophobia. Let's remind ourselves, let's go back to the beginning of this round, the controversial comments he made about Sadiq Khan.
We've got a very cowardly Khan running London. He seems to be letting the not only the Jewish population down, but the whole population of London and Britain as a whole. And I heard the comments earlier he was making about Suella, some of the comments she made earlier this week. And I don't actually believe that these Islamists have got control of our country. But what I do believe is they've got control of Khan, and they've got control of London, and they've got control of Storm as well.
Mr. Anderson has doubled down on his comments. He said they were clumsy, but he's refused to apologise, and he's released this statement. He says, if you are wrong, apologising is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength. But, the crucial but here, when you think you're right, you should never apologise, because to do so would be a sign of weakness. So, do you think, Tessa, the Tories should bring him back in?
Where I'm slightly confused is that Rishi Sunak has said his statement was wrong, but he has failed to explain why he thinks that statement is wrong. And I think the Conservative Party, I mean, allowing the likes of Jeffrey Archer in early doors days, and the Labour Party all posture as being these broad churches. And I think we need to understand why Rishi Sunak has removed the whip. And therefore, he has to say why those comments were wrong. Now, I believe they were wrong. I think he probably defamed Sadiq Khan. I don't have an issue, funnily enough, with being Islamophobic, fear of Islam, because I want to be allowed to speak openly and outwardly against Judaism, against Christianity, and against Islam, because I think all three are pretty controlling, invariably tend to be misogynistic, and I'm not an adherent of any of those Abrahamic faiths, and I want to be able to say that in Britain.
Okay.
But where I think he is wrong is that he was prejudicial against Sadiq Khan because he's a Muslim. But we need the leader of the Tory party to say that.
But that's it, isn't it? It's because he says his surname is Khan, therefore he's controlled by Islamists. Yeah. What do you think, Jeffrey? Should they just say, look, let's draw a line under this and have the guy back?
I was fascinated by Tessa's comment that the Labour Party and the Conservative Party both pose as wanting to be broad church. Yeah. Let me remind you, Tessa, it was the Conservative Party who had the first Jewish Prime Minister, the first woman Prime Minister, the first bachelor Prime Minister, and now the first Indian Prime Minister, whereas the Labour Party is led once again by a middle-class white lawyer.
Actually, I think to be fair to Keir Starmer, having read a bit about his background, he's of working-class stock, and I think he's often misconstrued as being part of the Islington elite. And I think if he does get voted in, I have many grave reservations about him. He's definitely not a woman. And I think he will be our first Prime Minister with integrity for quite some time.
Oh, OK.
Ow.
Yeah, but we're talking about Lee Anderson, and we'll open the phone lines to you. Do you think... So here's the challenge for Rishi Sunak, because Lee Anderson is almost in control of this situation. If Sunak doesn't take him back, Lee Anderson might actually defect. And if he goes to reform, that'd be a boost for their leader, Richard Tice. And we'll speak to Richard Tice in just a moment to see if he's thinking along those lines. 0207 862 2222 is the number for you. Welcome back. We're live on Channel 5 with Jeffrey Archer and Tessa Dunlop, no less. And we'll be debating later if abusive patients should be banned from hospitals, because that's what some hospitals want. They're going to ban people who are violent and aggressive to staff for 12 months. First, though, should the Tories take back Lee Anderson after his comments about Sadiq Khan? Last night, he appeared on GB News where he confirmed he would not say sorry for what he said.
I think the party could have given me a little bit more backing, if I'm honest. You saw the statement that I produced on Saturday, which I was willing to go with. It's shown a little bit of contrition in there, although I didn't directly apologise to Mayor Khan, which I'm not going to. Not while I've got a breath in my body. Because the comments I made weren't racist at all. They keep banning this word Islamophobia about. Nobody can explain what it really means.
And will you be a candidate for the Tory party in the next election?
Well, that's not up to me. That's out of my hands at the moment, Chopper. But I will be standing at the next election.
OK, it's not the first time Anderson has made controversial comments. He's made an awful lot. So let's just have a look. The problem with Lee is that he's just always starting fires. That's what he does in politics. So here we got this dishevelled Rishi Sunak being dragged around by the bulldog Lee Anderson. This was a cartoon after the death of some people in the Mediterranean, migrants, and he said people on the Bibi Stockholm barge, if they didn't like it, should F off back to France. That's what he said. And The Guardian turned this gleefully into a cartoon, F off back to France. And there's Lee Anderson, cartoonist dream, sitting as a sort of little Englander there on the beach. His way of putting out fires seems to be just to drench them in petrol, basically. That's how he rolls. He has his fans, so this is him talking about antisocial council tenants.
That these people who have to live somewhere, let's have them in a tent in the middle of a field, 6 o'clock every morning, let's have a walk, let's have them in the fields, picking potatoes or any current seasonable vegetables, back in the tent, cold shower, lights out, 6 o'clock, it's the same the next day. That would be my solution.
So, greatest hits? Well, we'd have to include this moment with The Spectator, where he said we should bring back capital punishment because it's 100% effective. No one who's been executed ever reoffends. And...
I'm Lee Anderson, your parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party. How you doing?
So, this is the incident where he pretended this voter was someone he met by chance, when actually the reporter Michael Crick had tape of him setting the meeting up.
I recognise it. It's Steve, isn't it? Yeah, I recognise it. And do you mind me asking which way you're going to go this time?
Well, I'm going to be up. There's no way Labour...
Just make out you don't make out you know who I am. You know I'm the candidate, but not a friend. All right. I'm at staff car park. Have a quick look. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the classic fires, the most famous fire starter moment was this, the 30p. The idea you can give someone a meal for 30p. He said he met a celebrity chef. He said we batch cooked 172 meals with 50 quid's worth of ingredients, and from that you get the 30p Lee comment. And then he doubled down. This is his assistant, Katie. She works for me. She's single. She earns less than 30,000. She rents, she's got student debt, she has commuting costs, she doesn't need to use a food bank, 30,000 in London. She makes my point really well. People criticised him for using his assistant like that. So here we are. This is the situation. Sunak uses him as the bulldog, says do your business, and then ends up in Ben Jennings' cartoon having to clean up after him the whole time. And the question is, Jeffrey, whether it's worth having that dog, if you're the owner.
Well, it becomes clear from the third interview you did of those 5 that he has no intention of coming back to the Conservative Party. What will be fascinating, because he did say he was going to stand as a candidate at the next election, is which party he will be representing.
Well, we may speak very soon to the leader of Reform. That's the worry. But do you think Rishi Sunak should try and get him back, Tessa?
I mean, this is an own goal by the Conservative Party, but it's been coming down the track. They've been courting these headbangers for years. We voted in one of them as leader, Liz Truss. Did you check her out last week in America, talking about the deep state and Steve Bannon and who's the national hero in Britain? Tommy Robinson. Last time I checked, she was nodding along to that. So if you court these headbangers and therefore alienate common sense conservatism. And I'm thinking of the likes of Dominic Grieve, who spoke out at the weekend, Baroness Varzy, who's often been on this show. You know, these are decent individuals. They almost make me feel warm about the Conservative Party. But there's now such a gulf between the clickbait headbangers and the ordinary souls who used to inhabit the heartlands of conservatism that they've got a choice. Do they fight Keir Starmer for those ordinary Conservative heartlands, or do they fight reform on the fringes? And my worry is Rishi's so weak, he'll headbang against the reformers.
So, but if you're Rishi Sunak, you can make a call. You can make a call to Lee Anderson today. You can say, look, we're not going to drag this out. We want you back. We'll put you back as vice chairman, and we just say no more about it. Would that be just suicidal for Rishi Sunak?
Well, I don't think he'd come back.
You don't think he would?
That's the point. No, I think the world is changing again. What we saw in France was Le Pen, when the father stood 30 years ago, getting 4%. They are now talking about his daughter becoming the next president of France. The Reform Party, the extreme right, believe that can happen in this country. And while they see what is happening in France, they believe it can happen.
They won't like being called the extreme right. We'll talk to them shortly. Margaret in Dunbartonshire, what do you think is going to happen to Lee Anderson?
I'm not very sure what I think is going to happen to him, but I think he should be taken back. I think we're in very, very hot water here of not being allowed to say anything against any religion, faith, colour, and I think it's a dangerous precedent to set. I'm not a Tory voter at all, but Keir Starmer was also mentioned in the triad that he put out, and that's been forgot about. So why is that not also getting spoke about then? Why is it only focusing on Khan?
OK, thank you. Colin in Staffordshire, hi.
Hiya.
Do you agree with Margaret that they should take him back because this whole, Islamophobia thing is running out of control?
No, they shouldn't take him back, not if they want to keep themselves to be a fairly clean party. I know a fair number of members of the Conservative Party who are decent, compassionate people. I get the impression that Lee Anderson is the opposite of that. He's a flip-flopper.
Yeah, but Colin, you're going to have, if I don't know if you're Conservative or not, but your party's going to have to win those red wall seats back, right? And Lee Anderson, they think, is the kind of guy who can do it.
It depends on how you win. If you win by having Rottweilers biting everybody and then turning around and biting you, that's not a very good way of winning. This man, it reminds me very much of Enoch Powell. And as far as what he said is concerned, let's turn that a little bit. If he had said that Sadiq Khan was in the pocket of the Jewish faith, and that basically leaders of that faith in Britain were running everything, like bankers, etc., then how would we have reacted?
Well, it's difficult to make that comparison, but I take your point that the ceiling would have fallen in on him.
I think that's an incredibly strong point by Colin, that actually if you flip it around and Sadiq Khan is a Jewish man and you suggest that he has a Jewish cabal around him controlling London, you're quite right. Lee Anderson would be toast right now. And one of the key differences here is anti-Semitism is racism. Because the Semites originally, actually, they included Muslims, but anti-Semitism is now this term for Jews, and therefore, if you say something anti-Semitic, you're being racist, which is illegal. If you say something against Islam, we don't have strong blasphemy laws in this country for a reason, so that we can speak out against all faiths. So that is how he's got away with this. It's actually, it might be defaming Sadiq Khan, but
you want him to be, what you said earlier is you want people to be able to attack religions.
Everybody.
And that's why that when Lee Anderson, and it pains me to say this, because I think in many respects he's a dangerous man, when he says this Islamophobia, no one can define it, he knows he's on strong ground.
OK.
Because actually it's about a faith, not a race.
Let me just bring in, we got the head of the Reform Party, Richard Tice, who's now in the centre of things yet again, because it seems, welcome Richard, it seems like Lee Anderson is going to join your party.
Good morning all. And look, I don't give a running commentary on discussions I have with MPs from any party. I put out a statement making that very clear. But there's a really important discussion about Islamophobia. And I think one of the issues that just been on the channel is, look, at the moment, because there's no legal definition in the United Kingdom, it's a matter of judgment. And I fully understand many judge that what Lee says they think was Islamophobic. But actually, what I'm interested in is the original definition of Islamophobia adopted back in '97 by the Runnymede Trust. And I've got it here, I think it's important. It said, was referring to the dread or hatred of Islam and therefore to a fear or dislike of all Muslims. They've upgraded that, the Runnymede Trust, into a longer definition. And I think maybe we're at a time now where actually the British government needs to adopt a legal definition so that everybody doesn't end up in this situation saying, is it, isn't it? What concerns me, Jeremy, is that people are using it as people are...
Yeah, but that's a very... Sorry, just... We know what he said. He said Sadiq Khan, who's Muslim, has been taken over by Islamists. Should he say sorry for that?
But he said it was clumsy. I think it was clumsy. What he was trying to say was that millions of people, British citizens, are very concerned about the extreme Islamists that are on our streets, in our towns and cities, week in, week out, spreading fear and anti-Semitism. And that is going on. And I know, because I've been into a couple of those marches to talk to people, and I'm afraid that actually there is a vein of anti-Semitism which is significant. Of course, not everybody, but it is significant and cannot be denied.
Okay.
Richard, that is the point. You have made the point for us all to hear. It is a small group of people who believe that in Islamophobia, or however you want to pronounce it, sorry. They are a tiny group, and we are linking with them very decent, hard-working people who this country rely on. And we've got to pinpoint those people who sometimes have riots simply because they want to be at a riot.
All right.
We want to get at those people, not at the decent.
Let me just ask Richard this. If Lee rings you and says, can I join your party because Sunak has shafted me, are you going to say yes?
Good question.
Look, it's a hypothetical, Jeremy, and let's wait and see. What I will say is that... Hang on, Joe. What I will say is actually, I've already turned down a couple of others. But look, Lee's heart is in the right place, and he speaks for millions and millions of British citizens who are really concerned. I'm concerned about these marches. I called for these marches to be banned because I knew what they would lead to, and sadly, I've been proven right. They've led to deep anti-Semitism. You've even got the police and MPs now frightened to essentially to arrest and to call out these extreme Islamists, and it's a terrible place to be.
Keep it on Lee. Keep it on Lee Anderson. Your question on Lee.
There seems to be a lack of focus where Lee Anderson talks and scaremongers about Islamophobia, and there doesn't seem to be the same weighting given by the likes of Lee Anderson and your party towards the far right. I was there on the weekend of Armistice, and actually the police said, that the big ceasefire march were pussycats in comparison with the far right who were storming towards the Cenotaph. So let's have balance here, and I don't believe your party or Lee Anderson deliver that balance.
Nonsense, Tessa, and you know it's nonsense. Absolutely ridiculous. I've been on these marches. I've seen the hatred from these extreme Islamists. I was at one recently. I was surrounded. I was pushed. I was shoved. I simply asked them, did they want to free the hostages? Did they condemn Hamas, a terror group? And did they condemn the October 7th attacks? And they wouldn't answer yes to any of those things. All they would do is scream and shout at me.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, Tessa. I'm not taking any lessons about Islamophobia from you.
I'm wanting to know when you call out the far right, when you call out the Tommy Robinsons.
I call them out all the time. That the issue at the moment facing us, Tessa, and don't whataboutery it. The issue at the moment on our streets, week in, week out, is extreme Islamists causing fear in Parliament Square, not being arrested for breaking the law, projecting a genocidal message on the House of Commons, for heaven's sake. That's the crisis at hand, Tessa.
Part of the reason is because of the language parties and politicians like yours and Lee Anderson's are using. But that's why they're being triggered on the streets. I put it on your doorstep.
Oh, that's nonsense, Tessa, and well you know it. Don't be ridiculous.
OK, Richard, stay with us. After the break, we'll take more of your calls on whether the Tories should take Lee Anderson back. 0207 862 2222. See you shortly. OK, Geoffrey and Tessa with us this morning. Later, we'll be asking if abusive patients should be banned from hospital. Richard Tice with us as well here. So Geoffrey, you've got a question for Richard. It's a good one.
Richard, you must realise, because you're a highly intelligent man, that if you fight the next election, you look as if you'll get, at the moment, you look as if you'll get 8 to 10% of the vote, which would be truly remarkable, but it will actually give Labour another 20 seats and give probably the Labour Party government. Is that your aim?
Geoffrey, you're a pessimist. We're going to do way, way better than that. That's the first thing. We're going to get millions and millions of votes. Secondly, Geoffrey, you cannot reward incompetent failure breaking a country with another contract to run the country. The Tories need to be punished for their failures. And the truth is, there's no difference between the two main parties. As you well know, Geoffrey, they're forms of socialism with high taxes, high regulation, nanny states, mass immigration, and pro-net zero. The country needs to be given a serious alternative, and that's what we're doing. And let's be very clear, Geoffrey, the Conservative Party do not own the philosophy of conservatism. And if they're not going to do a decent job and become socialists, then someone else will replace them, and that's Reform UK.
Well, you know what? Now I'm hearing him speak, Geoffrey. I'm thinking you can imagine a situation the Conservatives go down to 130 seats after the election and Reform have maybe 5 to 10 seats. And suddenly the Conservatives say, all right, we need a bit of Reform talent here. We need Tice and Farage and Anderson on the front bench in opposition.
And indeed, you will have noticed, Richard, because it can't have passed someone as old as me, that when I was a young man, the French leader, Le Pen, only got 5%. His daughter now, 30 years later, is looking like the next president of France.
Well, he won't probably appreciate the far-right comparison, but go on, Richard. Where are you on? Extreme right, hard right, far right? How do you like to be described?
Common sense. Some of our policies are to the left of Starmer, and some of our policies are traditional Conservative policies. We're the party with common sense that will save Britain, and that's why we released our contract with you, the people, in draft form at the weekend, setting out how we've got to reorganise the way our economy is run and managed, because we are heading towards bankruptcy and catastrophe if we head down the current route. On the one hand, you've got the Tories have broken Britain, and you've got the risk of Starmageddon facing us all this year.
We are now hearing the election. This is the election campaign right here. I can hear it. Sharmina's in London. Let's get back to Lee Anderson. Sharmina, what do you think of what's gone on with Lee Anderson?
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I just want to say, I just don't think that he should be allowed, because I find it was a racist comment. And as a Muslim myself, it made me feel a bit uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, Islamophobia is also high at the moment because of what's going on. And it's not really mentioned. And so is anti-Semitism, I completely understand. But you know, I am a normal British national, nothing to do with an Islamist, or, you know, I pay my taxes, I work hard, and I feel like we're all labelled, and it's just, I feel it's really unfair. I just want somebody who's fair, you know. I want somebody who will also speak for us as well. Like, just be equal, just be, you know, yeah, just be fair.
So you're British Muslim and you feel that this was Islamophobic?
Yeah, I do. I just feel like we're all labelled, and we're all like, I just get on with my day and I, you know, work hard, and I feel like I have nothing to do with sort of, you know, I don't talk to politics. I don't talk to Khan or anything like that, you know what I mean? So I just feel like, yeah.
Well, let me put this to Richard. I mean, this is the issue. Poor Sharmina feels that she's being judged by Lee Anderson and even put in danger.
And look, Shamina, I recognise that, and I think the point is that we need a legal definition of Islamophobia. But I actually think that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, at any moment, he looks to label people, to smear people, and to divide people. He's all calling anybody who disagrees with him, he calls them a racist, an anti-Muslim, and Islamophobic. He always looks for the opportunity. I think he's a terrible Mayor of London.
You are, Richard Tice, you are a wolf in sheep's clothes. There you are prevaricating, oh, we need a definition for Islamophobia. You know fine well what Jewish prejudice, or a prejudice against Muslims is. You can smell it on every one of Lee Anderson's comments, and you don't have the brass neck to call it out because you know it will alienate your rump vote who actually do feel...
Let him answer.
Dear old Tessa, I don't know what she's smoking this morning, but she's talking utter rubbish. I've never heard her talk such complete rubbish. The Mayor of London is constantly seeking to divide people. And my point is, what I'm much more concerned about, frankly, Tessa, is the death threats that my by-election candidate got from an extreme Islamist yesterday in the most vile, racist rant and video that's on social media that I've ever seen. I've had to move my staff out of their accommodation. I've had to engage security bodyguards. This, Tessa, is what's going on the streets, and that from extreme Islamism that you seem to completely deny exists. Shame on you, Tessa.
Thank you, Richard Tice, for joining us. Thank you, Sharmina, for your call. We'll take more calls on Lee Anderson after the break. Now, let's have some more calls. We were holding back on the callers. So, Lee Anderson, what do you think? Christine in Middlesbrough, what do you want to say about him?
Morning, everyone. They'd be very lucky to have him back, in my opinion. I think it's just all he's done... this racist card thrown up at everything anyone says. I mean, Khan straight away brought the racist up. Lee Anderson wasn't calling Muslims. He was just putting to the front the incompetence of Khan as a mayor. And let's be honest, look at London now.
Yeah.
And if Khan is in charge of the police and everyone, what a poor job he's doing.
All right, because if we switch Khan with somebody else, if you say Boris Johnson is Mayor of London, you say Johnson has been taken over by Islamists, that would not be Islamophobic and it would not be racist, right? It's because it's Sadiq Khan.
Racist. He had no intention of being racist. He isn't calling the Muslims. He's calling Khan for his incompetence.
OK, Christine, thank you. Mary in Manchester, hi.
Hi.
Do you think, what would you do if you're Rishi Sunak? Do you try and sort this out by bringing him back today?
No. I think he's well rid of now. I have phoned this show before and Tessa was on the show.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote to Rishi Sunak last year twice concerning what he said about the nurses. He said about the nurses that they earn £35,000 a year. They don't go to food banks. They must be spending their money on drink, drugs, or alcohol.
So I wrote what Lee Anderson said, yeah.
You did.
I wrote to Rishi Sunak and I've still never had a letter back. And Tessa was on the show last time when I phoned and she actually said to me, write to the King.
Write to the King? Did you write to the King?
No, I just left it. It's my opinion now. Like, I'm in the red wall seat. I will not be voting for Tory. They'll not get back in up here.
I mean, Jeffrey, they're going to have problems in the... Did you vote Tory last time, Mary? No.
I didn't vote at all because Labour have always got in.
What was it? What was your seat?
It's Grunder. James Grunder.
OK, I don't know which... It says
so you
Tory MP.
So you abstained last time and you won't vote Tory this time. There's a lot of people in that category.
But I want to know, who will you vote for, Mary? Will you vote Labour or will you vote Reform?
Labour.
OK, Mary, thank you. Sandra in Aberdeenshire, hi.
Hi.
Should the Tories take Lee Anderson back?
Yes.
Tell us why.
Well, he's not racist at all. He was just saying Khan wasn't doing his job right. People are scared. The British people are scared. When you see these racist things on Big Ben, which it was terrible.
When they put from the river to the sea.
Sadiq Khan had said nothing about it. The Prime Minister has said nothing about it. There was a projector there. The Met Police did nothing. There's people in masks and they're not getting arrested. There's journalists getting water thrown at them and eggs thrown at them.
So you think it's different standards? You think it's somehow different standards that you are... If you attack Israel, you are somehow given a free pass. If you attack Islamists, the world comes crashing down on you.
Yes.
OK, is that right, Tessa?
The racist
Tessa, hang on, let Tessa speak. Hang on, Sandra.
Sandra, what's interesting is I would suggest that the anti-Muslim vibe we're getting from our government, and sometimes we see it meted out in the way in which they've talked about the conflict on the ground in the Middle East, where you talk about the horrific deaths of the 7th of October and then Palestinian casualties, for example. There doesn't seem to have been a parity with the value of a Palestinian and therefore a Muslim life with the way in which we talk about an Israeli and therefore a Jewish life. And I think that's very triggering for our large Muslim population and those connected to them
Sandra,
in this country. So I'd say it's led by government.
Excuse me, the police could have took down that projector and they didn't.
But do you know...
Sadiq Khan has said a white family does not represent London. Who's the racist here?
OK, Sandra, thank you. Sorry, Tessa. Douglas in Edinburgh, hi.
I think 30p Lee is an absolute disaster. There's a growing number of Conservatives who are highly questionable. You've got David Cameron, got a job as a Foreign Office Minister, and he cost this country £5,000 million, and then they bring him back as a Lord.
How did he cost the country 5,000 million? Help me understand that.
5 billion.
The
5 billion?
The Greensill debacle.
Oh, Greensill,
David
right, yeah.
David filled his pockets with an estimated £10 million, according to the CIA, and it cost this country £5,000 million.
Lee Anderson, and you've moved on to David Cameron. They're rather different characters, Douglas.
I'm afraid they're all in the same. They're all. It's weasels in a sack.
OK, Douglas, thank you very much. Thanks for all your calls on Lee Anderson. Now, should abusive patients...